Neem Karoli Baba sends Casey Tuari, right, who's the protagonist in this movie, Brilliant Disguise.
Yes.
It's about him, to go over to a fire ceremony that was happening at the time where they were propitiating maybe the Divine Mother Goddess thing. Durga. So you go over there and do that. So he's over there, and nobody knows how to do that better than this man in terms of actually doing a ritual where whatever you're propitiating, whatever you're calling down, comes down. I mean, I've never seen it any other time in my life except with this man. I mean, it's just extraordinary. So he's out there
What do you
doing
mean whatever comes down, comes down?
the divine presence that's within whatever we're calling that Shiva, or in his case, he spent a lot of time invoking Shiva and Durga, the mother. That was
Okay.
his pujas were centered in
say,
that way. So when you're
when you
sitting there,
down,
when you're sitting there with him and he's invoking it's in the movie. You can see what him completely going out. I mean, this is somebody who we would be sitting with him, and he went into a trance state called samadhi, that there was no pulse and no breath. Okay, you read about it in ancient mystical books forever, but when it's right there, it's mind-blowing. Anyhow, so this is a person who did that. And he could do it when he was invoking. So if you were sitting with him and he was doing this ritual, invoking the divine presence of whoever it may be, you absolutely felt that in your body as it came down. Okay? Period.
Right.
Yeah. And then after a while, I'd get tired, and he'd say, "Yeah, just go sleep." He'd do it all night, and I'd have to go sleep on his bed in India because I couldn't handle it. It was just
what
way
did it
too
feel
much. Like density.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's the first thing that happens in absorption in a meditative state. Density. And it happened to me when I was 9 years old. I didn't understand it until I first started meditating when it happened again. I went, holy shit, this happened when I was a kid. You weigh like 2,000 pounds all of a sudden. And there's this, anyhow. So here's the story.
No, wait, don't keep describing it. You weigh 2,000 pounds and there's what?
You weigh 2,000 pounds. And then there is this sweeping thrill of kind of like when you start to just start peaking on psychedelic.
Yeah.
Your whole body gets filled. It's dense, dense, dense. Then suddenly it gets filled with like particles of. It's ineffable. To tell you what it is. Joy. Yeah. It's a stupid. There's only stupid words to describe it. But there is a vibratory thing that happens inside you, and then this kind of spaciousness that happens at this time is extraordinary, where you stop having boundaries and you're going out of your body. So
there's levels of these. This is, I can't remember the name. In Buddhism, this is described. It's a practice you could do in meditation that starts with you putting your attention. Like when you're meditating, some people when they're meditating, maybe they'll get to the very edge of it where you start feeling a good feeling. Like basically like it's a nice, maybe it's in your heart if you're doing metta practice, your hands maybe.
Peace is there. Yeah. Just
you start
peace
putting
and
your
spaciousness.
attention on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it starts off, and so the first phase of it is what you're describing. It's this sort of radiating, joyful warmth thing that happens that can get really intense, vibratory, even like you touched a light socket, and then it's followed by what you're talking about. The next, and it continues to become increasingly like more expansive or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
That's a good generalization for going into a meditative absorption state, for sure. But Tuari would completely gone. There was he would come back after a while, and this would happen under any circumstances. It didn't have to happen that he was meditating at all. I mean, around Maharaji, around Neem Karoli Baba, he'd just look at him, boink, he was gone, and then he'd look at us and go, "What happened to him? What's going on here?" and he would just dive us. He was like having fun. Anyhow, back to the story, okay? The
Yeah.
story of he was sent to do this ritual, not that far from Maharaji, like 30 yards or something. So he's doing it and he's completely into it. And then suddenly he hears Maharaji like shouting, "What are you doing there? What are you wasting? We're going to die here of hunger because you're doing this bullshit? Stop." Okay, this was the kind of, so when you talk about rascality, when you talk about cynicism, you talk about, I don't know, only some of the Tibetan masters, and only like Shirdi Sai Baba, who's one of the great siddhas of India, and left in 1815, something like that. Only they had that thing. There was no positive, negative, right? They were beyond polarity completely. So there was, in Maharaji's case, he had an irreverence, okay? What was important to him was bust the caste system, feed people, don't make them sit around and pray. And then, that was who he is actually. And so that irreverence and stuff, and it was in Ram Dass's humor. You can see it in the film with me and Krishnadas going back and forth about our experience and so on and so forth. But there are so many stories of this.
It doesn't have sanctimony. It's like, what's cool. It's like, because you would think that whatever these rituals are, whatever the ceremonies, it didn't start with the rituals and the ceremonies, but it was a byproduct of that state that Neem Karoli Baba or the cities are in. Once you're in that state, you start doing things, and maybe some of those things over time turn into the rituals that people replicate throughout the world. But the first people to do those things, they probably, it's inside out, right? Not outside in. Like, and it seems like Neem Karoli Baba was trying to get to the nucleus of what any of this stuff is all about. Because you can control a ritual, you can control a ceremony. You can even trick yourself into thinking that you're doing something particularly special because you have managed to bring down some energy or summon orbs or whatever. But all of that is sort of an exterior, a shell or something around something that's much bigger, right?
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to the point. It's like people who want to, I'm going to meditate my ass off, and something's going to happen. I have an expectation that something will happen. And that's, especially in the West, is such a common way. This is how we are. It's goal-oriented stuff. It has nothing to do with how, which is why you'll hear Krishnadas talk about this, and me and others of us. It's about, how can you be a little bit more kind, a little bit more compassionate and loving, as a human being.
This is what the paradox of the path, or whatever people are calling it these days, is that rather than shifting you into a state of, what we've all heard a million times, being kind to yourself, loving yourself, forgiving yourself, letting go of all that neurotic bullshit, it doubles the neurosis. Like, you start off a neurotic, and you're like, this is unbearable. I'm going to start meditating, chanting, going to Ram Dass retreats, listening to Ram Dass audiobooks, taking ayahuasca, whatever it is. And somewhere in that process, all of a sudden another level of neurosis appears, where now you're walking around like, oh, I'm profane. I've fallen. I'm so impure. I'm horrible. So now it's double horrible. You already thought you were horrible just by some intuition. You're doubling the horrible by this practice, or this thing you're calling a practice.
Oh, here's another story. This is great. This addresses exactly that. Exactly. This is great. So Krishna told me this story, and he's repeated it a couple of times. He goes to Maui when Ram Dass was alive, and every Monday Ram Dass would go swimming at a beach in Maui, he loved to do that because weightlessness for somebody who's been in a wheelchair for 22 years
Yeah.
was phenomenal. So anyhow, he went there and he got there late, and suddenly Ram Dass is sitting in his car when he drove. Nobody else is around. Krishnadas walks up to him and he looks through the window and he sees he looks awful, like depressed or something.
Yeah.
And he turns to Krishnadas and he says, "We're all fakes. You're a fake too." And you know what Krishnadas came back with? "Yeah, but we're
What?
real fakes.